Welcome back to the 27. This is a setup analysis for the Ultima GTR Race Edition. It was a mutual request from YZ249 and Racezilla. Thanks guys. We'll be discussing this car in some detail, comparing the default setup to one that I created for it with the hopes that you might see some improvements as I did. The Ultima is sort of like a street/track hybrid kit supercar/race car. In game, it's the kind of car that I would consider to be sort of unheralded in the AMS2 community, generally liked, but never really heard from. Anytime it is mentioned, people are quick to say, oh yeah, it's a great car. But then again, it's rarely brought up in the first place. At the same time, I feel like it's kind of polarizing. The people that like it are vocal. The people that don't kind of whisper it like they feel bad admitting it. I'm definitely in the latter category. It's really high powered for a light car. It has a power to weight ratio of 0.491 according to the Cars of AMS2 website, which to put it into perspective is like 30% better than a GT3 car and a touch more like, say, an F3 class car. It has light to moderate downforce, but what really makes this car interesting is its suspension and its really short wheelbase. It's nimble, it can corner like no other. For drivers that like it, I suspect it's because of that mid-corner to exit throttle play. You sort of have to dance with it a little bit. It's not as planted as you ever really want it to be for reasons we'll discuss in a moment, but I can certainly see why somebody would consider this a skill car, or at least not boring. But taking it out on a pleasure cruise is one thing, and taking it out under race circumstances where you want to minimize risk of error is another. So after we were done, consider the Ultima GTR to be unpolarized. It has the accessibility for someone who may not have liked it before, but still retains some of its character for someone who did. We really had to kind of overhaul a bunch of things here. I felt like even though weak, it had an aero imbalance. The default differential did nothing to tame it mid-corner or exit like it could, but the most important thing I discovered was the damping package by default was completely imbalanced. The Ultima GTR has a two-way damping system, which is not uncommon. If you look at the setup screen, you'll see just slow bump and rebound settings, and that's fine. The primary role of dampers is controlling the oscillations of the springs, but they can also serve to control the weight shifts of the car when it's braking and cornering. You've driven cars in AMS2 enough, you should be able to notice that sometimes cars have this subtle left to right, front to back, diagonal kind of wobble to them. Well, these are the dampers at play, and if they are unbalanced in any direction, front to back, side to side, or diagonally, you will feel these subtle little weight shifts that could upset the car or at least keep you off the throttle for a split second more. The Ultima GTR has this sensation, but to me it wasn't subtle. To me it felt like it was all over the place, with understeer at times and oversteer. Looking at the setup screen, a big red flag for me, I should say, was how unbalanced they were on paper. So if you see a big difference between bump and rebound settings, chances are there are damper issues. So we set about to balance them out and then altering them for taste. The second most important thing I changed was the differential. It was very much on the open side of things, which can help with cornering, but this car did not need any help in that regard whatsoever. In fact, I moved strongly to lock the differential up to tame its cornering characteristics. So more plates, more preload, and lowering both the coast and power ramp angles. Even then, with the power to weight ratio this car has, it really liked to step out, so we softened the rear springs and ARB. But what really helped was more downforce. This kept the car planted and on the ground as much as possible. It helped keep the differential from unlocking as well. So what we ended up with was an Ultima that was pretty planted but still retained that cornering ability. But don't worry guys, I didn't neuter the thing. It still can get a little spicy, especially when pushing. You're going to lose some ground in a straight line as the featured race suggests, but you more than make up for it in the corners and exits. You'll be driving circles around, guys. So let's take a look at the telemetry. Alright, here we are with RST, and you can see as always I have two sessions registered, one with the default package and one with the custom package. One thing to note about these lap times, I wasn't necessarily that much slower with the default package. It was just a lot more of a car to handle. But you can see with the custom package, the two best lap times were almost within 3/thousandths of a second within each other. So I mean, that's consistent right there, and that's what you're looking for under race conditions. But the first thing I wanted to point out was the dampers. This is these are damper histograms. They reflect the damper speeds of the rebound on the left side of each of these graphs, and then the bump on the right side of each of these graphs. The higher these graphs are, the higher each of these individual bars are, represents stiffness. So you can see that the rebound side is much stiffer on pretty much all of the axles than the bump side. If you look at the setup tab itself, it'll reflect that as well. So it's actually pretty obvious. What we're trying to do with the dampers, though, is to balance them out. So what we would do is either reduce the rebound or increase the bump. This would create these nice peaks, and I'll go to the comparison views here. You can see right here where my mouse cursor is pointed is the 0 node. This is where you want the peaks to be, and it's obviously clear that the stiffness of the rebound is dominant with the default package of the Ultima GTR. So let's take a look at one of the laps that we did with the custom package, and you can see that the peaks are much more appropriate for right on the middle of the 0 node for the left side of the car. On the right side of the car, we have these things called bimodials. That means it's like sort of like a dual peak. Those aren't necessarily terrible. That basically means, and you'll see these quite a bit if you're doing like really a really strong like curb work. If you hit the curbs really hard, you'll get bimodials. But if I was flat and not hit any curbs whatsoever, I'm sure that I have some really nice peaks on these things. The next thing we're going to look at is the differential. And first, let's look at the default package. There we go. We have a wheel slip unlocking at over 20 here, over 50 here at Villeneuve. At Tosa, we're looking at 20, and then over again here at the chicane before the Ravazza curves and after Acqua Minerale. That's not uncommon to have a large unlocking there, but we also have some unlocking in the 20% or the 20 range in the Ravazza corners, which is kind of bad. So let's take a look at the custom package. Let's look at the fastest lap, actually. I think that's probably better. You can see we have still a lot of unlocking, but not as much. I'm going to cross-reference it real quick with yellow. You can see these peaks are a little bit more muted. It seemed like with the Ultima GTR, the harder you drove it, the more it would unlock, the worse it would behave. So you really got to find that nice balance of keeping the car planted and keeping the throttle down, but appropriately. If you go too hard on it, it's going to bite you. So let's look at the run tab next. Another interesting thing here was how we were able to tame some of the tire wear. So if you look at the default package, the right front was at 14% wear, which means lockups and things like that. We were able to bring that down within reason, equalize it a little bit more. The rear left tire on the Ultima got a little bit more wear. I think that's because of the unlocking that we were doing and getting a little bit more tire fire from an unlocking diff. And so finally, let's look at the temps. Now I wanted to point this out. This doesn't look good as far as what I usually like to see. The front right tire was at 73 degrees at the end of 3 laps. The rear right was at 80. I don't usually like to see it that high because a 7 to 8 degree temp delta means it's going to keep going in that direction. If it keeps going that direction, it's not a good thing. You're going to lead to spin outs. But I felt it was acceptable with this car because I wanted to keep that cornering ability. And if you compare it with the default package, you can see it was the opposite. The default package, the right front was 79 degrees and the right rear was 78. And I think that's because at the Ravazza corner, let's bring this in, at the Ravazza corner, it was going downhill and making that left hand, the right front tire was just getting killed. So yeah, the more stable package, more predictable cornering, all leads up to more consistent lap times here. So that's the Ultima GTR race with some setup adjustments that bring it back from La La Land. Coming up, we'll have the Copa Chevette's big brother, the old stock car, and we'll be throwing that around a little bit. In the meantime, thanks for watching and take care.